Hey there, welcome to the Liberalist stream number 2. I'm Dan Werner, aka Brundlefly. You can find me on Facebook if you search, and if you have good detective skills. We have with us today, go ahead guys.
I'll go first. Yeah, my name's Billy McGarry. I am the creator of the Facebook group. I'm AKA nothing because I don't have another pseudonym. There you go. That's me.
Hey, I'm Brendan McGee. I'm an admin. I like to read. That's it.
I like
Alrighty.
to read on the toilet.
Oh yeah, always. That's where I do my homework as well. Well, I did anyway. Back in the days.
Alrighty, let's get into it here. We have a couple hours. Let's have some fun. So first up, we have this lovely Icelandic gentleman. I won't even try to pronounce his name. His YouTube handle is Lord Pepe, and he has some very good criticism for us and a very interesting survey at the end of that. So here we go.
Hi there, and welcome to the Lord Pepe channel. I want to start this off by stating that I am very hopeful about the Liberalist initiative. I really wish to see a liberal activist organization come into existence, because there's hardly anything being done to introduce this ideology to people at large, and I am certain that a lot of regular people have a great deal of sympathy with the ideas behind it, and really could use a helping hand in articulating them better, which I do believe might have a significant...
Alright, gentlemen, you're going to have to put on the YouTube stream and listen to that.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah, I'm just loading up now.
Alrighty. Let me just set this up for you.
All right.
You let me know when you're good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Hi there, and welcome to the Lord Pepe channel. I want to start this off by stating that I am very hopeful about the Liberalist initiative. I really wish to see a liberal activist organization come into existence, because there's hardly anything being done to introduce this ideology to people at large, and I am certain that a lot of regular people... Hi there, and welcome to the Lord Pepe channel. I want to start this off by stating that I am very hopeful about the Liberalist initiative. I really wish to see a liberal activist organization come into existence, because there's hardly anything being done to introduce this ideology to people at large, and I am certain that a lot of regular people have a great deal of sympathy with the ideas behind it, and really could use a helping hand in articulating them better, which I do believe might have a significant, albeit intangible effect, because the ideas will simply transmit better. By that I mean, whatever this organization does, it hopefully equips someone to present a more carefully articulated argument, which some other person that isn't even familiar with this little initiative will hear and think to themselves, well, that's a fair point. I am of course thinking in terms of mimetic warfare and not in the colloquial sense of spamming internet memes. Because I care about the cause, I'm going to offer some criticism and some suggestions. So, you better listen up, senpai. I'm just awful, aren't I? First of all, I am relieved that you revised the statement of principles. I know it was just a draft. The worst thing in the draft, which Jean-François correctly criticized, was the statement that groups shouldn't have rights. He brought up like corporations, which I don't think is the best argument, because corporations are legal persons that are given rights which they hold independently of their owners, no matter how many they are. For example, if you destroy property of a corporation, the corporation will be awarded damages, not the shareholders. A much stronger argument against the statement, I realize that you have changed the text already, is actually to point out the right to self-determination, which I know that you're for. This is a right that it is held collectively by the citizenry as a group. It's not a right held individually.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right. So regarding the whole idea of group rights, one thing I talk about this in my book that I'm writing. Where Sargon put down the idea of groups can't have rights, I don't think he ever meant the idea of corporations in the sense of an association can't have a right, but rather you don't have a right due to being a part of a group. Like how I define them is essentially a group and a collective are two different things. A group is simply a categorization of things that exist. For instance, so we are in the group of white men because we meet the category of being white and being a man. Being a collective is rather an association of individuals in order to pursue an objective. So I think that's a definition, a distinction we need to be making between group and collective. So rather, I would say corporations wouldn't be classed as a group, but rather they would be considered a collective, since everyone who is an employee of a corporation is working towards the goal of the corporation to make more money. Whereas, yeah.
I also think that actually Sargon put no group rights in there as potentially a troll, because as soon as people picked up on it, literally, I saw it started going around Twitter, and as it come to people starting to do videos on it and that, it was gone. So literally, in one of JF's debunking videos, he sits there and he's reading it out. And he goes, this has changed. This isn't what I read this morning."
No, but what do you think though? The distinction between group and collective. So the group of being white and being black, you won't have any rights for being white or being black or being a man or being a woman, but rather.
Yeah. Well, that's why I actively fight against.
No. Yeah, but saying that an association of people, you have a right to associate. So I think that collectives ultimately would. Not inherently have a right, but they can have rights, essentially.
Well, you secure the rights you secure the rights of a group by securing the rights of the individuals within the group.
Yeah, that's ultimately what it would come down to.
But they are universal across each group.
You would have privileges from being in a collective rather than rights, because we discussed this last time, didn't we? The idea of not having a right to certain things for being disabled, but having privileges granted to you as a result. So I think that's ultimately a further distinction we have to make. So the first is the difference between group and collective, and then ultimately, from that, the distinction between a right and a privilege.
But again, though, and I was saying this last time, is it's not really a privilege for a disabled person to have a ramp. You're simply bringing them up to the level of everyone else.
That's the definition of privilege.
It's help up the ladder.
That's the definition of privilege. They get the expenditure of the state towards making their playing field level. It doesn't take away from other people. And the difference I would make here between a group and a collectivist and all that is, when it comes to corporations, is that a corporation has a hierarchy wherein there is one person who has the responsibility fall on them. So I'm not too... I
always thought that privilege was advantageous. So it's not advantageous for a disabled person to have a ramp that leads up to a shop, because without it, they wouldn't be at the same level as everyone else, would they? So is that an advantage? I suppose it depends what
I'd say it's an advantage in the sense that it's essentially it's gifted to them. But my problem with the idea of privilege is, like, the actual definition is the granting of a right, and I don't think I disagree with the fact that you can even grant a right to begin with. So it's just semantics at this point. That's my problem.
Yeah, it is semantics.
All right, let's go back to the video here.
Yeah.
I got over 200 responses. It is very unfortunate, however, that SurveyMonkey only allows you to see up to 100 responses without paying like $500. I've been saving up for a semester abroad, so there's just no way I'm spending that. If anyone has some cheaper alternatives, or better still, free ones, I would greatly appreciate getting a link to it. Then I can, God willing, do this properly. Okay, so let's start with gender. So it's prominently male. However, these are just the first 100 responses. If you look at them all, we'll see this. We don't get the exact figure, but 7% might be a slight underestimate. It's pretty clear there's probably no more than 10% of the people in the group that are indeed female. This makes it worth considering what aspects of liberalism appeal to women and how we can reach them and introduce them to those aspects. It's fair to say that the people that are in the liberalist group and on the liberalist Reddit are young, although not in their teens. 71% of the people that answered the survey are between the ages of 18 and 34. Not surprising, but it's good to keep it in mind. Actually, I was slightly surprised by this, because I thought there would be more people outside the Anglosphere. I frankly expected more Germans and France. The United Kingdom is overrepresented, so perhaps our energies would be best spent trying to introduce more Americans to our message. People in other categories were sprinkled around Europe, like Italy, the Netherlands, Iceland, Slovenia, Portugal, and Greece. Looking at this actually gave me an idea. If there is like a liberalist video that's the go-to video to introduce people to the liberalist society and its political philosophy, we can spend some money on getting it translated into at least French, German, and Italian, because people in those countries tend not to speak English, opposed to like the Swedes and the Dutch, for example. The race question is really overwhelmingly sour creamish, to be frank, but let's take a look at the graph that includes all 202 responses. The cutoff point after 100 is just prior to that diverse bar, so the first graph is really skewed. There are two demographics that I think we might make some headway in, that are South and East Asian. They already suffer from race quotas, although white people are probably overrepresented here, at least as far as America and probably the United Kingdom are concerned. However, I believe that my fellow liberalists are quite welcoming to people regardless of their ethnicity. The liberalists are generally employed, and I really should have put a student category there, because the ones that are out of work are probably students, considering the age range. It shouldn't come as a surprise that the people surveyed are generally excited about this initiative, but there are still a relatively large portion that is sort of on the fence, interested, but perhaps skeptical. Okay, then I had two questions that actually concern a hypothesis. The hypothesis I had was that people interested in the liberalist initiative are somewhat, let's say, dissident. I haven't tested whether or not this is statistically significant, but these results are so one-sided that I suspect you would find that if this was done properly. And here's one question for the lulz. Opinion on whether traps are gay is divided in the liberalist community, but a majority thinks that traps are in fact gay. I suspect, however, that there might be a strong pro-trap sentiment nevertheless. Well, I hope you found this interesting. If you all make sure to spread the message and participate in the Liberalist Society activities, then perhaps we can even make a significant impact in the future. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you did, then please consider liking it, sharing it, or even becoming a subscriber.
Some people in the chat saying sound is bad, but it could just be Lord Pepe's deep accent. I can understand him in his own video.
It may just be his video. I can turn down some of these things here so that we're not peaking. Here's the thing: we're gonna have to redo how we do videos over this over these streams. We missed his criticisms, but I do remember them as I did write them down. His biggest criticism, and I think the most fair, is that there needs to be basically a decision regarding marketing in rhetoric. The importance of rhetoric is very important within any movement. Now, I look at the American Civil Rights Movement of the 50s and 60s as a near perfect example of how a cultural movement should go to achieve peaceful change. If you look at their signage, for instance, and especially when you compare it to Black Lives Matter, it was inclusive, it was positive, it was to the point. Like there was no question as to what they wanted, and they included everyone. Because back then you definitely needed to have white people at the front of the parade, so to speak, to get mainstream support. Now, honestly, if Martin Luther King operated under the rules of Black Lives Matter and We Shall Overcome became Black Shall Overcome, that movement would never have gotten off the ground. So
no, never.
I mean, what do you guys think in terms? What do you guys think in terms of rhetoric for the group? Bill, I'll start with you.
So what do I think because of rhetoric? Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of rhetoric. I know obviously it needs to be there, and it especially needs to play a important role in politicking, if you like. But I'm not a huge fan of rhetoric. I much prefer being on the side of laughter. I always find that laughter opens up messages more. I don't want to become a meme brigade by any means, but rhetoric, I don't know. I need to sit and think on it. It's not really something I've thought about. I'll pass it over to Brendan and then come back to me in a sec because I want to have a think about it.
What do you think, Brandon?
I'd say it's the flip side of the coin for mimetic warfare, essentially. both rhetoric and memes are going to appeal to normal people. Just as a good meme can make people laugh, a good slogan can really draw people in. Ultimately, I not I'm not going to call myself an academic, but as someone who likes to read, I don't care how something's worded, just if it's a good idea. Stand the use of rhetoric and drawing in normal people, because without normal people, we're going to get nothing done, because almost everyone is normal, essentially. When I say normal, I mean like the average person. They're not going to care to read a 50-page document regarding principles of a group. They're going to want to hear a good catchphrase to draw people, to draw them in. And I think that's ultimately what it's going to be useful for. So yeah, I agree. We need some rhetoric.
Yeah, I can definitely need something that even the, how do you put this? Not, well, I'll put it bluntly. Even the idiots can say back, and the idiots in the media can't take and twist and make you out to be a monster, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, even if let's just say, for instance, I feel that Europe needs codified constitutional law, such as America has with freedom of speech for all.
Yeah.
Free speech now is to the point, perfect to me as a rhetoric tool. You also have to find a figurehead who can speak eloquently, that could relay the messages, and the people on the street in the movement can follow. As an example, you look at Martin Luther King, or you look at Gandhi. They were what the activists looked towards as to how to act, and if you removed either of them, much like Occupy didn't have a hierarchical structure or a figurehead to look towards, it just devolved into mob madness and BS that nobody wanted.
I'm inclined to agree, and I must admit I'm slightly concerned about a comment I saw Sargon make on one of the posts in the group earlier. He put he was going to start an organisation, but it would be leaderless, and it would be the people within the group would be responsible for predicating its ideas, which is fair, but I think you need a focal point for said ideas. You need leadership. Especially with a group that's so opinionated as ours. You need that focal point. You need a driver. You need someone at the front that's pulling everyone with them.
Yeah, or if not one, then having a group.
I think we'll just scatter to the wind.
Like an oligarchy could work, because I don't think having one person in charge is ultimately the best idea. Having like a group of people for discussions is always. But you need
like Dan was saying, you need a figurehead, don't you? I'm not saying you need a god, but you need someone who's a focal point, and at the moment Sargon is that focal point. But
well, what you need is here's a really good example of what happens when you have an activist movement without a de facto hierarchy of leadership. It's like two pincer arms in a vice. You need the figurehead on the street that the activists follow, and then you need the group behind that is the hierarchy, de facto leadership. A really good example of how that will turn out without those things is Egypt in 2011, that when everyone went to Tehran Square in Cairo and demanded Mubarak leave, Mubarak left, but the people on the street had no systemic involvement. So the Islamic Brotherhood stepped into that vacuum of power and eventually had to be taken out by the military. Now,
yeah, that's a second clue.
Yeah, so when Sargon goes, oh, we're not going to have a hierarchy, if that's what he means, he's foolish, and he is literally condemning us to failure by doing that.
He made this point ages ago in a video. It was I'm pretty sure it was Antifa. On Reddit they were discussing the requirement of a hierarchy. The idea that you don't need a hierarchy is ludicrous, and I know he knows this, but I think rather he just wants at the moment to be I like the idea of like free discussion. That you don't have people just essentially saying these are definitely the ideas that we're sticking to, but rather just allowing everyone to have a free discussion of the ideas themselves for now.
Mm-hmm.
So let me read you the comment, because it's actually on topic, because it comes from Bryn O'Jura for Sven Iverson's criticism video, or Lord Pepe as he shall forever be known.
Lord
Pepe.
Pepe.
Yeah, I'm not reading that name again, Jesus. So it comes from his friend Sargon, or Cole in this case, but exactly right, chaps. I will found an organisation, but it will just be that, an organisation. Everyone is still free to conduct themselves as they see fit, regardless of what I do. So maybe he's not negating leadership there. Maybe I took the comment slightly wrong.
Yeah.
Everyone is still free to conduct themselves as they see fit, regardless of what I do. Okay, so now maybe I'll go back on what I said. I think I read it wrong.
Okay, good.
I don't think he's necessarily saying leaderless. I think he's just saying, look, do what you want.
Yeah.
Which
But,
again,
did we miss some of fucking Iverson's video? 'Cause I'm pretty sure we skipped his idea of the right of self-determination. The bit about rhetoric, the idea of shirts, and then the video that Sargon did, raising the point of rather than just disregarding, what was it? Was it Tom, Jack, or whatever? I think it was Jack's point, and then just saying, oh, you know, where are you getting this information from? You could have provided the sources himself. So, what if we go through these step by step quickly?
Sure, go ahead.
Right, so like straight after the idea of the statement of principles, he raises the idea of the right of self-determination, and I think it goes to more than self-determination being a right, but rather self-determination is the foundation of rights. If you don't determine yourself, then how can you be said to have a right to anything?
yeah, it's the foundation of everything. I believe every action you do, every philosophy you think, every principle you hold, self-determination or the self. Is probably the most important part of it.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you think then?
No, I think you're exactly right, honestly.
Okay. Alright, so I guess we're done with that bit then.
What's the problem with liberalists? We agree too much.
Yeah, we do. We're basically communists.
Yeah.
Regarding the black t-shirts though, I agree that if we're going to want to be presentable, we do need to be wearing shirts. So as he says, I fucking just despise that fucking culture of having to appear a certain way. That's just me personally.
I go to work in a suit every day.
Well, that's not a bad idea. That's actually a pretty good.
It's good to look smart.
Every
I'll tell you what makes you feel good as well.
I agree. I just fucking despise the culture that we the requirement to do so.
Here's what I think about.
I don't look like a bloody homeless SJW.
Yeah, in regards to.
There's a difference between looking presentable and then having to wear suits and stuff. I'd say it probably comes down to Jordan Peterson. Clean your bedroom essentially.
Yeah, I think it would look great if everyone took care of their personal appearance to put out the. I like the idea that the new counterculture is kicking yourself in the ass, being responsible, and taking care of business.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Like that.
I think we've got sound issues. Sorry, the button.
Yeah, what are these sound issues?
Chat, tell us what the sound's like. I have no idea what the night-faced dude is trying to say. It's you, Brendan.
I don't know if that's from
Well,
sound or what he's
Just
saying.
say something, see what it sounds like on the stream.
The audio of the other two went to shit. It's probably because I was butting in. Oh, modern technology. Why can't we just stand on soapboxes in the middle of Trafalgar Square?
Okay, guys, I'm just really quiet, so I'm not actually coming through properly.
You sound fine to me. Everyone is quiet except the host.
I listened back to the stream.
Well, if you want to go through and mess with your mic and turn it up a bit, that would.
I've got it set to max.
All right.
Yeah, mine's to max. It's saying everyone's audible except only you're audible, Dan.
Night Dude is back. All right, I had to put the audio output capture up.
Okay, is this better?
I'll talk a little quieter.
Yes, now is okay. Right, let's crack on.
Thank you, Christian. All right, let's.
Oh, fantastic.
Let's crack on here, as the UK guy would say. Now, as far as what you want to look like as a movement, you want cohesiveness and consistency. You want inclusiveness. You want positive, coherent messaging that is right to the point. because what you have to watch out for, just what happened with Occupy Wall Street, is that because they had no hierarchy working within the system, they Abby Hoffman in America went through this as well. If you do not work with the media, they will manipulate what you say every time. And we cannot allow that. But going back to the civil rights movement, for instance, before they became a joke of an organization, the NAACP worked behind the scenes within the system to get the Civil Rights Act passed, and we can have various opinions about that act, but it was honestly real change that they made over decades of work, and you cannot deny that it didn't have an impact, and you cannot deny that it didn't have an impact on the culture. SJWs, they're not trying to impact the culture, they're trying to keep it the way it is, or make it worse. So it's extremely important that we look the part of responsibility. And to his survey, to Lord Pepe's survey, I think we're majority male is because there needs to be a return to responsibility.
And you think that men they buy into the idea of responsibility more than women, or is that what you mean?
Go ahead, Bill.
Sorry, I was going to expand on Brendan's point. What do we mean by men hold responsibility? We're looking for responsibility in men.
I wouldn't exactly say men. I would say masculine energy, because there are women that do take on that kind of responsibility. But the responsibility I'm talking about is upholding Western values that have brought us to this point where we do allow communist idiots to run in the street, because we understand that they're human too and they have equal rights. Even if you disagree with someone, they still have the right. We're in danger of losing that. And to me, masculine responsibility is maintaining a fair and just culture in which everyone can thrive. And if we lose that, I don't think there's any...
I agree. Yeah, it's that old saying. Or I don't know if it is an old saying. I've only seen it recently. When how does it go? Good men create good times. Good times create bad men. Bad men create bad times. Bad times create good men. We're going through that cycle again, aren't we? Well, a lot of us have had it so comfortably, and I mean, I haven't exactly had a comfortable life, but politically, we've had it so comfortably over the past generation, and especially for the boomers, that we've relaxed our liberal principles too much, if you like, so they're not defendable anymore, or to the point where they're not defending themselves. And it's time for the good men, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm a good man, but I want to do my part to protect our liberal societies. But I do it. I'm selfish though. I do it because I want my children to live in a liberal future. I don't necessarily do it for you or for anybody else.
Well, when you
do, that is ultimately the best way to approach though. If everyone is selfish and if everyone wants to protect their own rights, then everyone's rights are going to be protected anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If everyone cleans their own bedroom, then everyone's got a clean bedroom.
That's exactly.
You don't need to force anyone to do anything.
Right, I think that's.
I agree.
I think that's a good segue to the tolerance image we saw from some Marxist cocksuckers. So,
I do want to jump in quickly though. I do have one thing more to say. Where it's basically I just want to attack Pepe right here. When talking about the races, he says whites are overrepresented. I just like, what does he mean? All we're doing is representing ourselves. So I wouldn't say that we're overrepresented, but simply people are just interested in this group.
Yeah, I think it was semantics on that one.
I'd say he's buying into the idea of the power politics right now. He needs to sort out his.
The thing is, as well, is the demographics of our group is pretty much the demographics of Sargon's audience, because let's be fair, the majority of our PR is done via Sargon. And Sargon's audience, as well as YouTube, is predominantly male for a start. I couldn't talk for how racially demographic it is. But the reason that there's so many males and so many white males is because of Sargon's audience, I'd say.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I honestly feel
what I mean by that is it's not necessarily due to the principles. It's not just that white men only care about principles. It's just that a large part of Sargon's audience is white men.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah. That's a good point. You're not going to
representation-
get BuzzFeed starting a liberalist movement, are you?
No, exactly.
So there's nothing we can fucking do about it, really.
No,
Ultimately, we got to hope that
just
people
hope-
share it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you spout your principles and your ideals and everything else, and if a black trans attack helicopter wants to join the group because of those principles, fantastic. Feel free.
I think representation is the most useless statistic on the face of the earth. I mean,
Yeah, of course it is.
who really, when you devolve human identity into such simple categories, it's like, well, what about height? What's the average height of the liberalist? What's the like our buddy Christian here in the chat says, what about brown-eyed people? Like, we have to make sure our representation is the friggin' census? I mean,
Yes.
Seinfeld faced the same problem too, and he had a great answer. He goes, what is this supposed to be, the census? He goes, I like funny people. If you're funny, you're in. If you're not, you're
Well,
out.
that's it.
That is spot on. It's perfect.
Do you want to?
That's why I say if you're liberalist, you're in. There you go.
Do you want to move on?
Or
to
even
this
if you just want to discuss it. But yeah, if you want to move on to the picture, let's go.
Let's check out this picture from some Marxist twats here. Let's put it up here. It's called The Paradox of Tolerance by philosopher Karl Popper.
Yeah.
May I just quickly, before we go into detail, may I just quickly tell you how I got this picture? I mean, I've seen it before, but how I got this picture for this stream.
Okay, go ahead.
So, very quickly, I was sent that picture because a Twitter personality was calling Count Dankula, who's another Twitter personality, they were calling Count Dankula a Nazi for having a stream with Baked Alaska, who is actually alt-right. So
Wow,
that's where this picture comes from.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
guilt by association. Allowing him a platform made him a Nazi.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
So that's where this comes from.
I'd like to say also that when it comes to representation, to the earlier point, when you look at diversity of thought in the liberalists, it's very diverse. You have people that are left of the economic spectrum. You have people that are very right of the economic spectrum. We even have some slightly more authoritarian types and slightly almost anarchist types when they think about cultural libertarians. I'd rather the diversity be of opinion with a shared kinship of,
definitely.
of values. That's way more important. But let's get to this paradox of tolerance. And should a tolerant society tolerate intolerance? And it has a nice picture of a tiki torch guy. And Adolf Hitler getting a boot in the hinder. And I don't know who that is in the second photo. The tolerant ones...
On the left.
The tolerant ones end up being destroyed and tolerance with them. So what do you think they're trying to say with this photo?
I think they're saying that you just need... it's essentially that you can't have opposing points of view. Obviously, I don't think they want it to be as simple as that. Because there are going to be opposing points of view within intersectional feminism. For instance, there are some who place women above trans people. There are some who place trans people above women in the what's it called? The hierarchy of being oppressed, essentially. So I don't think it's. Let me start this again. Essentially, I think they mean that you just can't tolerate the intolerant. Essentially,
That's exactly what they mean.
But then the old yeah. So I'm just trying to work. You talk. I've got to think.
So yeah, what they seem to be saying is the paradox comes from the fact that we are tolerant, but by being tolerant, intolerant will destroy our tolerancy. So in the context of why this was sent to me, they were saying that by Count Dankula giving Baked Alaska a platform, he's allowing Baked Alaska the means by which to destroy our tolerance. However, they actually use this paradox to be intolerant. so it's a self-eating snake. Well, I personally, as a tolerant person, I say give everybody allow everybody to spout any view, no matter how disgusting. They should be allowed to spout it, providing it's not actually calling for violence.
Yeah.
They should be allowed to spout it, because if we don't see their views and their views aren't out in the open, they cannot be challenged. And I actually think this has been a very big problem in Britain, where we've made hate preachers, like Islamic hate preachers, we've made them illegal, because we should make them illegal when they spout violence, but even when they just talk about kafar and all this sort of stuff, they've actually made that illegal. So it's driven these hate preachers underground, where now they're out in the open. When people are trying to attack them, hate preachers, they were like, well, they're illegal, so now you're just attacking Muslims. Yeah. So actually, the paradox of being tolerant to the intolerance, in the eyes of the SJW that sent this to me, is completely incorrect and not the way to deal with it. And I mean, you just look at Hitler. Hitler was censored for fucking years before he rose to power. They tried censoring him, the Weimar Republic or whatever, tried censoring him for 15 years. And he still won. He still bloody came out, because there was no one there to challenge his views.
Right.
They let him fester
underground. I did just have a thought, though. I think that we should buy into this principle that they're espousing here. So any kind of Marxist thought must be eliminated instantly. So no postmodern thought at all allowed in our society. What do you think?
Well, if that's the rule, then let's do it. Fuck it.
You know the answer to that. That wasn't real Marxism.
Yeah.
I know. Never is.
I have to give the fascists credit. They never claim it wasn't real fascism. You know?
Yeah.
And just like you said, historically, this image is totally ridiculous, because Hitler was censored greatly. He was thrown in jail. Honestly, I think doing that made him a martyr.
He was thrown in jail for trying to overthrow the government.
Right, but
to be fair,
yeah,
it wasn't because of what he was saying.
Which was a little bit different. Yeah.
I guess that would be the difference.
But he was heavily censored. His books were banned. His essays were banned. He was banned from talking in a lot of public arenas. That's why he started doing his talks in back alley pubs and all this sort of things. And there was no one there. And the people that tried to challenge his ideas were ultimately themselves censored, because to challenge their ideas, they needed to raise those ideas. It just doesn't work. Censoring, it just don't work at all.
I'd say at the end of the day, it's sort of a insult to the common person, as if they're so idiotic or evil that they're just going to let people come in and do this. If they hear them say these words, they're going to turn around and kill people. It's like, that's not how it works. I think people are generally good. They don't want to hurt other people. It's a little insulting, because I'm just a working class schlub with a library card. If somebody came up to me speaking about any topic, I'm not going to instantly believe what they say, and I don't think most people will. I honestly think that what I would do is take on their information, do what Aristotle said, and entertain their ideas, challenge it, and let it do battle. That's how free speech should work. You let it do battle, and the best, most reasonable ideas that come up with the best outcome are what is going to be accepted. It's the same reason why I disagree with, like, Glenn Beck, for instance, in America. He'll say that cultural Marxism is a conspiracy. I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's just very easy for people to take on that cultural Marxism, that moral relativism, because it allows them to be immoral themselves. It gives them an easy out. So it's really the common person adopting an idea that makes it popular. That's
of course.
I mean, if with this image, what if we said, all right, well, we can't have Islam here?
Because, I was just about to say that. If somebody says, okay, well, we have to be tolerant of religion X, but it sounds like religion X isn't tolerant, then you have to eliminate it, aren't you? That works for anything. That's the problem. That they may want to use this argument to say, well, this is why we can't have Nazis. But guess what? It works for so many other things that they are in support of. That it's ultimately just going to lead to annihilation.
Right.
This is the problem with power politics. I'm writing a chapter on this in my book. It always leads to annihilation. It has to.
I'm gonna put a ban on you talking about your book until it's actually released.
Censor him.
Send to me, bitches.
Here's a comment. Did he really, though? I'm assuming Hitler. Did Hitler really, though? Seems like a lot of people wanted what he offered. Yes, a lot of people wanted what Hitler offered. That was the lesson that people forgot about World War II, is that
he was a product of the time, wasn't he? That's the thing.
well, he required...
Germany's economy was in the toilet.
Exactly.
They had lost millions of people in World War One.
He required a complete system destabilization to come into power, and that's exactly what the far left wants. I'm talking about the hard left.
Yeah, exactly.
And the far right. They want systemic insecurity so that they can step into the vacuum of power. But it's never them who steps in the vacuum of power. Hitler killed his brown shirts. He rounded them up and shot them all. And same thing with Lenin when he shot his useful idiots. I mean, you think you know what you want, but it's never going to turn out the way you think it is.
Well, that's it. It's like, at the end of the day, who got more Germans killed than Hitler? You know what I mean? How many Germans died in World War World War Two? 11 million, something like that.
Well, as far as the percentage of population goes, if you look at the 30 Years' War during the Protestant Reformation, somewhere between 25% and 40% of Germany's population was either killed or left the country. So
and now Merkel's increasing that number back up by essentially outsourcing. So.
So I'm trying to read the comments. There is no scenario where keeping Muslims around is worth the deaths, rapes, and issues they cause. Why the hell does the rest of the population have to worry about one going fundamental at any point?
I disagree with that, because I don't think it's the people, it's just the belief itself.
Well, also,
how it's the same as communism.
How your country...
There's plenty of liberal Muslims out there. Look at Majid Nawaz.
Your country kind of fails at integration. I'll be completely honest. Your country does kind of fail at integration into the larger culture. If you read Ayaan Hirsi Ali's books, she goes into very good detail on how the current refugee immigration system that is used in Europe basically incentivizes these people to create their own little communes instead of putting them within a larger population and not letting them bring 20, 30 family members over.
Yeah. Well, our problem wasn't that we were bad at integrating. We've had plenty of different demographics come into the country and integrate just fine. It's partly the reason that a lot of the reason that I don't see race as a problem is because I have lived and grown up with a lot of people from different races, different backgrounds, or their parents are from different backgrounds. And when it comes to culture, they're pretty much indistinguishable from myself. But there is a subset within there that aren't, and that a lot of them are Muslims. But it doesn't mean that Muslims can't be liberal. And the biggest problem we have with integration of Muslims is we brought too many over at the same time.
Yeah.
Literally, you had, in the space of 5 years, you had almost 800,000 come.
Plus all the...
And they're only the recorded ones.
Wait, really?
All the free welfare.
Yeah, it was significant.
I was not aware of that. But then again, bringing in any large population of any group of people with different culture, / beliefs, is always going to lead to trouble.
Yeah, it was significant. It doesn't matter where they come. Labour brought them in as voters. that's all they done. Well, it is. The problem that Labour always had was Labour. When you're young, you tend to vote for Labour because you don't have as much money, and as you grow up, obviously you want. Well, obviously you want to start protecting that money, so naturally you become more conservative and you drift towards the Tories. The Labour saw this, and Tony Blair saw this, and went, well, the best way for us to do it is to keep bringing poor people into the country. So we have a nice poor population that keeps voting for us. We don't want to make everybody too rich because then no one will vote for us.
Also, what a better way to have more poor people than institute communism. Yeah. So now we know what Corbyn's doing. So
let's all be poor together.
Did you see what Corbyn said the other day? He said,
take 8,000 homes for homeless people.
Yeah, take out homes that aren't in use or whatever.
Yes, I read that and I was like, ooh.
I wonder if that includes vacation homes. You may want to explain.
To be fair, though, I do have some rather socialist thoughts on this. And it's more pragmatic. I don't think that we should be able to take away people's property. But I think we have to understand that, A, we live on an island. Although it's a big island, we do live on an island. And B, our housing market in Britain is treated as a commodity. So we have foreign investors that will buy properties, especially in London. They will buy properties, leave them vacant because they don't want to have to deal with the cost of having tenants in your house. So they'll leave them vacant, wait for 10 years, and then sell them off. And when we have a housing shortage, I'm not saying by any means, I'm not saying that we should take away these people's property that they have purchased with their own money. But at the same time, can we as a society allow that to happen when we do have British people on the streets who are homeless? And this is a question I'm posing to you guys, actually.
Personally,
I say no. I say you cannot take away people's private property.
Personally, I would say if you have a nationalist streak in you, it's not so much socialism as it is nationalism to say that first rights of refusal should go to citizens when it comes to property. You don't want someone from another country coming in and buying up a bunch of property unless they have... Unless it's like... And I'm talking about residential. I'm not talking about commercial or industrial. I'm saying, like, okay, we have this residential property. We can sell it. We can sell it to... Basically, I'm saying, like, the state can incentivize the purchase of property by private parties that are citizens of the country. I think that's a far better solution.
Honestly, my solution, if were I Führer of this country, Prime Minister.
It's the final solution.
Yeah, my solution would be to place regulations on the housing market to stop it from becoming a commodity. Because that's the biggest problem. I mean, we have to understand that we're an island. We don't want to build houses over some of the most beautiful lands in our country. But, you know, do we want housing to be treated as a commodity rather than a utility, let's say? I don't think we do, personally. So I think actually it's not a problem with private property as a right. It's a problem with the economy of housing in this country.
Okay.
Or the government could just build more social housing.
No, that's what that's to go back to Corbyn. Essentially, what a Labour spokesperson said that for now they would be taking houses that are deliberately left empty for 2 years, not including second homes, people who have been taken into care, or active service people.
Yeah, that's kind of garbage. You can incentivize people to put people in the property they own by giving them a tax holiday, by giving them tax breaks towards upkeep of the home, maybe making some of the tenancy laws. I'm not aware of them. I'm no expert on them in England, especially. But for instance, here in Connecticut, it's really hard on the landlord to own a property and rent it out. The rules are explicitly against the landlord at almost every single turn. And
no, it's not like that here.
Yeah, so essentially the state would be better off incentivizing for the outcomes they want rather than punishing for the outcomes they don't want. Because
I agree with that. Incentivization is always more efficient.
And also, the thing is, sure, the spokesperson says that they're not going to take second homes, but what did Corbyn say straight after the Grenfell Tower fire? They said, "Oh, we're going to take some of the homes that have been left empty."
Yeah, he's clutching at the bit to take people's property, isn't he?
Yeah. Right now, he's saying, "Oh, sure, it has to be empty for 2 years. Oh, sure, yeah, it won't be second homes." What happens when he says, "Actually, no, we're going to have to take second homes"? And also, 2 years is a long time. Let's make it a year. Actually, a year is a long time. Let's make it 6 months. Actually, 6 months is a long time too. Let's make it a week. If you leave that house for a week, we're going to fucking take it.
If I was a
16-year-old then it would be. Where did I read this? I can't remember if it's a historical happening within Britain or if it might have been communism. Anyway, I don't know. But I don't know where I heard it. But somewhere there was, if you left your home, you would have to pay people to live in your home while you were gone. Otherwise, someone could come in and just take your home from under you. Where did I read that? I'm going to have to look that up.
Doesn't matter where it was. It's fucking disgusting.
But yeah, but this was an actual historical happening. This used to happen. I'm going to have to look it up. But going back to Corbyn as well, is him saying, well, if your house is empty for 2 years, we're going to take it off you. That's not going to work, because all they do is go, all right, well, we'll rent it out to tenants.
Yeah.
It's not going to help with the housing crisis whatsoever. What will help with the housing crisis is taking away housing from being a bloody commodity and invested it into bloody commercial building, get more houses built.
My big thing is, I mean,
Yeah.
if
Well,
I'm a
Labour wants to build
16-year-old
more houses anyway, so
Well, the Tories have pledged to
a
build
fuck ton more houses. Oh yeah,
loads more houses as well.
My thing
yeah.
is, if I'm
As far as
16
I'm aware,
years
though, the
old,
Tories want to sell them.
I'm leaving high
Well,
school,
that's fine. Build them and sell them.
and I have no incentive whatsoever to work towards anything because the government's just going to give it to me. That's just
Well, that's it, isn't it?
that's just
Exactly.
so dumb. I mean,
That's the problem of the welfare state. It's ultimately dysgenic.
Yep. Well, you want to going from this? You want to talk about Sarah Khan, Bill?
I have no idea who she is, so if you could explain to me.
I will, but I do have to just run and get a drink. So talk amongst yourselves, and I shall be back in 5 minutes.
Yeah, we're going to talk amongst ourselves here. You hear any good music lately, Brandon?
Okay.
Talk to the chat. Back in
Talk
a
to
sec.
the chat. That's a good idea. It's a good idea. All right. Jugo 617 at 25 viewers changing the world. Actually, Jugo, I think you'll find we have 26.
Yeah.
So, tough luck. All right. Joshua DeLu 14 at Jugo 617. Doesn't matter how small or big, change is change. It's a good point there, Joshua. Good point.
Thanks for kissing our
Start
ass.
off small. Yeah. Well, we're not going to get all of Sargon's sub straight away, are we? It's not like we're doing his bloody work for him.
We were given a healthy push, and it's up to us, each of us, not just the people in the stream, but those watching and those in the group, as individuals, to take this responsibility, put it on our shoulders, make some good shit, good memes, good arguments, good everything, and put it out there. Put up your best ideas. Take on that responsibility. Stop asking other people to do things for you, like make a utopian super state that is never going to happen. I mean, stop whining.
Exactly.
Get shit done. I mean, if you're not writing right now or making plans to make videos or looking at your local community and how you can help, like, to me, you're a fucking loser. I'm going to sound like that bitch from...
Oh, that's a bit hard.
I'm going to sound like that bitch from the Young Turks right now. But if you're not making steps as an individual to make your community better, get fucked. That's my thought on it.
So what you're saying is that you're better than them.
My actions so far have been better than some who just sit around and make streams about their utopian future. Or man, did you see that one I saw posted in the group where the guy was like, anarchy is the only answer, but he was really just describing communism?
Jesus, wait, no, I didn't see that one. What day was it?
Oh, it was yesterday. I'd have to look up the guy again. I think it's the Guardian.
Oh, I was like in bed all yesterday. I was sick.
Yeah, it was, I think, in the Guardian.
Oh wait, so it was an actual newspaper, not some dude in the chat, or in the
It was a video from
in the
chat.
actual page.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a video. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wait, so the video was published by the Guardian.
Yeah, it was published by something like the Guardian or one of those Mike.com bullshits.
And it said that anarchy was the only way, but really they were just talking about communism.
Yeah, basically. That's about it.
Well, as far as I'm aware, though, like proper communism is meant to be like anarchistic anyway, because the idea of having the governing class is always going to lead to problems.
Well, isn't it?
So I guess they're right when they say it's not real communism, but
Well, no. The thing is,
fuck 'em.
even
Like
Marx
that.
said it would take a period of totalitarianism to bring about the classless society, but they never get away from totalitarianism because humans don't want to give up power like that. I mean, what human?
no, most people don't know.
Oh. Bill, you back?
I'm back. Sorry, yeah.
All right, you better be sorry, you son of a. All right. So
My missus is pregnant as well, and her legs had locked up while she was on the sofa.
Well, good job fighting. good job fighting that white.
Oh,
genocide.
Bill, thank you for propagating the white race.
No problem. This will be my third, so I'm getting there. I'm doing well.
Jesus, above the
Yeah.
2.4.
Above the 2.4,
Nice.
we'll probably go for 4 as well, to be honest, and stop there. I'll get the snip. That'll really anger the F-nose.
So you should be having 15 children.
To be fair, if I could afford it, I would. Yeah, I
That's
like.
far too many. I could not remember 15 different names.
Well, I think 15's a bit much. I think if I was like a millionaire, I would probably go for like 6 to 8, maybe.
I like Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, well, you can have get some nannies and that, so you ain't even got to look after them if you're a millionaire.
Yeah, that's a
do
good
their own
point.
thing.
All right, Bill. Let's go through this Sarah Khan
outsourced
thing.
parenthood.
So Sarah Khan, right? So the story with Sarah Khan, and the one why I thought it was interesting because it highlights a rift between progressive liberalism and moderate Islam. So Sarah Khan is a left-wing activist. She writes for The Guardian, she writes for The Independent, she writes for Huffington Post. So just by her credentials alone, you can see how progressive she's going to be. She's also a ardent feminist and women's rights champion, if you like. And basically, the British government has just appointed her Tsar of the counter-extremism, their new department of counter-extremism. And because of her left-wing views, the 100 Muslim institutions, which consists of the Muslim Council of Britain, some high-ranking Muslim clerics, Baroness Warsi, who is the first ever female Muslim Lord of the House of Lords, or first peer, shall I say. They've all petitioned the government to have her removed from the position. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about this as a wedge between the progressives and Islam, especially considering the progressives are always championing the rights of Islam, if you like.
Wait. So what is the problem then? So the problem is that she's left-wing progressive. So she
has they're saying because of her views, because her biggest part of her activism is championing for women's rights within Islam. That's one thing, and secondly, she's obviously progressive.
Oh, so these groups are opposed to
her
women's
appointment.
rights stuff?
Well, they're opposed to her appointment in whole because she's a left-wing activist. Because she isn't an Islamist. In my book, that is why they're doing it. They're not doing it because she isn't a moderate. She is a secular left-wing Muslim. Whereas they want to see an Islamist / moderate Muslim in the position. Whereas I'm of the mind of actually the government, for once, have done something right here, because the biggest thing that Islam needs in Britain is liberalisation. It's in desperate need of it.
So essentially a reformation of the whole.
Yeah, so she will be heading the counter-extremism wing, which will be responsible for coming up with policy on how to combat fundamental, or let's be honest, how to combat the Islamist ideology within the communities, the Muslim communities.
I can give them one. Stop Saudi Arabia giving out Wahhabist Qurans. There we go.
Exactly. Yeah. Stop foreign money. And I actually think, because I've read a lot of her material now, and she's a lot more progressive than I, for sure. But I actually believe that if the government allow her enough freedom to, she could really make some big changes for the Muslim community in Britain. And not just for the Muslim community, but for cohesion. Initially, I'm imagining bad because there's going to be a lot of pushback. So I think you'll see a lot of rhetoric coming out of the Muslim institutions. But I think in the long term, for the good, because what we need from Islam is we need them to be liberalised in line with British values, which they aren't at the moment.
Right. Do you think she's actually going to make those changes? I mean, from what you've read and get an idea about her, is she just going to be a figurehead? I mean, is she really qualified for this position too, or was it just because she's a female Muslim, so got to put her up there?
Well, there were some. I believe there were some criticisms of her credentials, but if I'm honest, from what I've read so far, the ideology is there, and she's highly endorsed by other left-wing liberal Muslims, like Majid Nawaz absolutely swears by her. So I think the ideology is there for her. I think she's got the potential momentum within herself to make the change. The thing is, I don't think we should be putting an Islamist or a moderate Muslim in a position of power where that power will potentially lead to the liberalisation of Islam, which is what they need in this country.
So you'd say she's more of a reform progressive?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize, and I see the chat's very cute, a lot of people don't realize that Islam is 1,400 years old. I mean, what was...
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here, because where is it? Damnation 3. The issue with Islam is it's younger than Christianity. Well, when you look at Christianity, though, it wasn't really until the 4th century with Constantine, the edicts of Thessalonica and Milan, that Christianity became a proper, like, actual religion. And then the Reformation was, what was it, 1517 or
Yeah,
about there.
that's what I was gonna say.
So in which case, it was only about 1200 years old by the time that a Reformation came about.
Yeah, and in
The thing is, I don't.
1400 years into Christianity, we were doing horrible things. 1400
Yeah.
years into Islam, they're doing horrible things. Just like with the Soviet Union, the way America did it, we have to uphold and give the platform to reformers. Let people like Ayaan Hirsi Ali or Iman Talvidi and others, like, give them the microphone to tell people, like, hey, we need to reform, we need to rewrite the Quran, like that.
Oh, can't change the words of God, man.
No, yeah, they're gonna have to, and we're at a
I did just
crossroads
have a
now.
thought though. We've currently had 100 years of communism, so after another 1400, we might get something good. What do you think?
It's gonna take courage, and does this woman Sarah Khan have that courage?
I think
No
so.
idea.
From what I must admit, I don't know her personally, but from what I've read, and if we can take what she's read as a good indication of her ideology, then then it's definitely there. Do you know what I mean? She appears to have the will to want to have the change. Now, I don't think she's not going to reform Islam as a whole. I don't think she'll be in the Middle East on a soapbox, fucking telling the women of Saudi Arabia to raise up. But I think she will do wonders for liberalising. She'll do wonders for either liberalising Islam in this country or for exposing its fundamental conservatism.
This is gonna sound really dark. But the best thing that could happen, as far as her project of liberalizing Islam, is for a fundamentalist extremist to kill her.
I was just you want to make a
That is
martyr
pretty
out of her.
dark.
That is dark, yeah.
Obviously, I'm gonna say right now, I'm going to generally just say for all of us here, we don't want that to happen because we don't want her to
Of
die.
course,
That's
no.
just, we
But the
don't,
thing is,
want it to happen.
if that were to happen, it would be a violent change, and
Yes,
violent changes are less effective than peaceful ones.
it will lead to more violence and it will lead to death.
Well, I
And
think that's where
I
we're
never
heading.
want to see that.
I mean, the amount of violence we got in the Christian Reformation, like I said before, 25 to 40% of the German population gone. We're heading towards that. These secular, sectarian, however you pronounce it, civil wars within a religion are extremely bloody and violent. Like, there's really no avoiding that. When I say best thing, I don't mean that's the desired outcome, or that's what I want to see. Obviously not. I do not like violence in any way, shape, or form, but it's just the reality of the situation, is that what her message is, or people like Ayaan Hirsi Ali message is, it leads to people reacting violently. You can't even draw Muhammad without a bunch of scumbags showing up and shooting up the place.
You can if you have a state and a populace that's got the fucking bollocks to stand by their principles.
Unlike
If
France.
if I was running a newspaper in Britain when the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attack happened, the paper the next day would be a big picture of Mohammed. I'd be like, "Fuck you! I ain't capitulating to you."
Well, ultimately, that's what comes
That's
down to it. Like, when you have I thought it was ISIS, yeah, when they were going around destroying sculptures and stuff. It's because it's not just that you can't have any images of Muhammad. You can't have images of people, as far as I'm aware. That's the whole point. It creates idols.
It's the thing though, like and this goes on to a wider point I'm always making, is that we've been so fucking liberal, and excuse my language, but we've been so liberal that we've lost the ability to defend ourselves.
That's not liberal.
Politically.
That's not liberal. That's progressive.
It's progressive. That's what I mean, though. But they've stolen the label, haven't they?
Yeah.
From my understanding of liberal, defending yourself is one of the most liberal thing you can do.
Yes.
Yeah. Defend yourself and defend your rights.
It happened with FDR in America. He was a progressive who took the term liberal and stole it. When did it happen to the UK, do you think?
I believe it was around the same time. When was FDR? I believe I was reading. When was I reading?
He was about 1900, wasn't he?
1932.
I was way off.
I believe it actually must have happened after then, because I'm sure it was around the late 40s, early 50s that progressive liberalism really took hold in Britain.
But we need to make the clear distinction between progressivism, which at its outset, when it first began, was a racist policy of eugenics and minimum wage to keep blacks out of the labor market, to liberalism, which is almost the complete opposite of progressivism.
Yeah, of course.
I mean,
I can appreciate that.
I'm reading Ben Shapiro's Bullies right now, and I like Ben Shapiro. No echo quotes needed. He continually says liberal, liberal, and uses it interchangeably with progressive. If I was to meet him, I would beg him to just call it progressivism, call it leftism, call it progressivism, and help us retake the term liberal and what it's supposed to mean, because that's what built our entire civilization, was these liberal principles.
Yeah, I was having this argument with a friend of mine, actually a work colleague. He's a real good guy, but I think he's a touch inculcated by the alt right. Not a lot, because he's got a good head on his shoulders. He's really smart. But he was saying he was going through the usual thing, saying, "Well, liberalism caused this, liberalism caused that, liberalism caused this," and I'm like, "No, you're wrong. Progressivism caused that." So I'm like, "What freedoms do you enjoy?" And he was coming off with the freedoms, and I was like, "Well, that's liberalism."
Yeah. Well, most people.
But he couldn't. I could see it wasn't registering with him. He just couldn't seem to get it.
Well, I ran for local office, and most people, they don't even really investigate who is running under the banner of the Democrat or Republican. They don't investigate the person's principles. They go into the booth, they see the letter they want, and that's it. Even I was reading this study where split tickets, where people would vote between parties and pick and choose, that's almost completely gone at this point. Like, people are just straight ticket voters right now. And that's why, and I'll make this quick, I was telling people in the group and in real life that if you want to affect change within your city or community and run for office, your best bet is to find the party that is most popular, take their banner from them, and run against them in primaries. And once you do that, it's easy sailing into the election, because people, especially locally, are just going to go straight ticket. I mean...
party politics is the cancer of democracy.
If we don't play it right. There's a way to play it right. It's when people try to run third party that, in America at least, that it's useless. It's totally just ideals before pragmatism. And I can understand someone going, well, I'm libertarian and I'm going to run under that banner. It's like, that banner won't get you in office, and that's the point of running, is to win. Like, so,
Yeah, you need to enact change from within the system.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Not outside of it.
You need action on the streets, and at the same time, action within the system. So,
which usually is the most effective, in the long term at least.
All right, it's about 3:40. Brendan, I was going to read out the chapter 21 of Hobbes' Leviathan.
Okay. I was thinking of one way to do this is there's lots of divisions. It goes like part 1, part 2, all the way to let me find chapter 22, up to part 25. If we go like through each section, then we can have a discussion.
Okay, I just have a PDF of it straight through, so you just tell me to shut up and I'll stop.
Okay.
All right. So I'm gonna read quickly. There's a link to this plus the Lord Pepe video underneath the stream description, if you want to check that out. There's also a link to the Sarah Khan story. Check them out, make up your mind, and feel free to bring your different opinions. Here's
okay. Yeah, before you start, this first section is it's Liberty Watch, so it's essentially defining what liberty is.
Defining liberty, yeah. Chapter 21 of the Liberty of Subjects from Hobbes' Leviathan. Liberty, or freedom, signifies properly the absence of opposition, and may be applied no less to irrational and inanimate creatures than to rational. For whatsoever is so tied or environed as it cannot move but within a certain space, which space is determined by the opposition of some external body, we say it hath not liberty to go further. And so of all living creatures, whilst they are imprisoned or restrained with walls or chains, and of the water while it kept them by banks or vessels that otherwise would spread itself into a larger space, we used to say that they are not at liberty to move in such manner as without those external impediments they would. But when the impediment of motion is in the constitution of the thing itself, we use not to say it wants the liberty, but the power to move, as when a stone lieth still, or a man is fastened to his bed by sickness.
Well, that's the end of that bit. Okay. I just really want to get the PDF up because it seems to me there's actually a section missing. It's only small. It's a bracketed section.
Yeah, it says by opposition I mean external impediments of motion.
Okay, yeah. Okay, it is there then. Okay, in which case, yeah. So what do you two take of that? Then I'll jump in once you have your words.
I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay. Essentially, I'd say I'm pretty much entirely in agreement. I've got my little book of notes up here. Let me just open up in case I've written anything down that I'm ignoring. Uh, uh, no, no. Okay. So essentially, yeah, liberty is just freedom from. It's the same idea as that Mill puts forward in On Liberty. Essentially, liberty is freedom from tyranny. Of course, Hobbes doesn't seem to concern himself at all with your freedom of thought, but rather just the fact of like the idea of freedom of movement or working. He seems to be saying that liberty is only concerned with the body. So so whilst you may not be at liberty, for instance, if you are chained to a wall, and you could be said to not be at liberty because you are imprisoned, you're always going to have your freedom to think. But in which case, he doesn't see this as liberty, so there's no point discussing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it applies to both man and inanimate objects too.
Yeah. Well, went into more detail about social tyranny, and it does seem, I agree, that Hobbes ignores that facet of human existence. But when it comes
Yeah.
to a person, at least maybe materially speaking, liberty is not being constrained by external forces so much. Um, I agree with that. I mean, I think that's, and I'm sure the whole thing of this, at least to my point, is to reinvigorate what he means and put it into language that today we can understand. You know,
Yeah.
not that it's impossible to understand, but it's extremely not esoteric, but it's very old timey. You know.
Okay, yeah, so if that's what we're going to do, then I like for each section, then we could just summarize that with a sentence. So for this first section of what liberty is freedom from impediment.
All right. So
That is like the best way to summarize it in my eyes.
all right, on to the next section.
Okay, this is what it is to be free.
All right. Let me know if I'm reading from the right spot. And according to this proper and generally received meaning of the word, a freeman is he that, in those things which by his strength and wit he is able to do, is not hindered to do what he has a will to. But then the words free and liberty are applied to anything but bodies, they are abused. For that which is not subject to motion is not to subject to impediment. And therefore, when it is said, for example, the way is free, no liberty of the way is signified, but of those that walk in it without stop. And when we say a gift is free, there is not meant any liberty of the gift, but of the giver, that was not bound by any law or covenant to give it. So when we speak freely, it is not the liberty of voice or pronunciation, but of the man, whom no law hath obliged to speak otherwise than he did. Lastly, from the use of the words free will, no liberty can be inferred of the will, desire, or inclination, but the liberty of the man, which consisteth in this, that he finds no stop in doing what he has the will, desire, or inclination to do.
Oh, that's where it stops. Okay. Ultimately, I think this in the section right at the beginning, a freeman is he that in those things which by his strength and which he is able to do is not hindered to do what he has a will to do. I think that summarizes up perfectly. It's essentially to be free is to do that which you are able to do and want to do. So being free, so essentially you are not free. So no, so let me say that again. Okay. If you want to do something but you can't, you cannot be said to be not free because you never had the capacity to do it in the first place. In which case, you would never have the freedom to do so. So, for instance, like with the idea of let's just take affirmative action. If you are put into a position, simply because you fit into a category that they want, but you do not have the capability to do so, I would say that you, by being in that position, you lose your freedom since you do not have the capacity, even if you have the will.
All right.
How does that sound?
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. And
Your liberty doesn't come from your desire. You know, it comes from.
liberty comes from the combination of both your capability and your desire.
It needs to work in concert. I like
You need both of them.
I like the part where it's where is he? No liberty of the gift, but of the giver. It's sort
Yes.
of, we have responsibilities. Like, your right to speak right now is because I'm not killing you, essentially. Like, I know that's a bit extreme, but
Yeah, or if you're not like if you're not just putting head to prevent me moving my chin so I can talk. Not my chin, my jaw. Sorry. Yeah, it's that's essentially I'd say what it comes down to. Um, like he doesn't seem to be concerned at all with freedom of thought, but I'd say as far as he's concerned, it doesn't matter what your will, desire, or inclination, which I would say you could classify those as like you could classify thought with those. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's the actual implementation of the thought itself into speech that he's concerned with.
well, real quick, does anyone hear something that could be put on a poster board? A nice, clear, concise message from any of this so far? I mean, it's something to think about.
Um, hmm. I'd say my summarization of his definition of freedom is good. To be free is to have the power and the want, so to say.
All right, what's this next section called here?
Okay, this is fear and liberty. Yeah, fear and liberty consistent. This is probably my favorite part of this whole section.
Well, tell me to stop.
So it goes from fear and liberty down to liberty to omit.
All right, well, tell me when to stop. Fear and liberty are consistent, as when a man throweth his goods into the sea,
Okay.
for fear the ship which should sink, he doth it nevertheless very willingly, and may refuse to do it if he will. It is therefore the action of one that was free. So a man sometimes pays his debt only for fear of imprisonment, which, because nobody hindered him from detaining, was the action of a man at liberty. And generally all actions which men do in commonwealths for fear of the law are actions which the doers had liberty to omit.
Okay, that's it. All right. This I'd say is probably one of the most relevant sections in this entire book. It's like you know when the Harvey Weinstein thing was coming out and there was the Me Too, and we heard from all of these different celebrities saying, well, I wanted to say something, but I feared losing my job. And it was like, oh, and as such, because I feared losing my job, I wasn't free. I had to do it. It's like, no. So it's like when it comes down to it is, if someone puts a gun to the back of your head and they tell you to do what they say, right? Somebody may say, well, at that point, you're not free. You have to do what they say. And it's like, no. If someone has a gun to the back of my head, I always have the choice to say, go fuck yourself, shoot me in the back of the head, you cunt. You're always free to do so. And to claim that you don't have that freedom is absurd. That is essentially what this section comes down to, and I am I'm entirely in agreement with it. I think he's probably the best thing in this book.
Well, very well said. It looks like Lord...
It's interesting. It is interesting, though, because I agree with you, but can someone... Yeah. Just trying to wrap my head around it. If someone's got a gun to the back of my head, yes, I am free. I am free to run the risk of having my head blown off.
Yes.
But is that a freedom worth having?
Are you going to be responsible for your actions? I'd say it is the most important freedom. The freedom to say no to people, to defend your freedom.
Oh, of course.
Like I said, the freedom to defend yourself is the most important. If that defense means doing what you want, and if doing what you want ends up with you dead, then so be it.
Oh, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. But in the sense where somebody else has a gun to the back of your head, and yes, you absolutely have the freedom to say, go fuck yourself, shoot me in the back of the head.
Yeah.
But is that in itself a freedom worth having? I mean, what is freedom without life? It's nothing.
Well, you can't have freedom without life. But then the question is, though, ultimately, there seems to be problems of responsibility. That seems to be saying that ultimately, why would someone else using their freedom stop you having access to your freedom? Like, in the sense of someone having a gun to the back of your head doesn't thereby make you not free.
Well, of course
it just means that you are. It just means that you're afraid to use your freedom.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, through someone else exercising their freedom.
Yeah, that's essentially what a law is. It's you have this freedom, but don't you dare do it, or else something's going to happen to you.
Well, then it's not freedom, is it?
Well, I'd like to take a moment.
I know you're saying it's natural freedom. You have the freedom to do it, but you also have the freedom to be thrown in prison for those actions.
Well, that's the problem though. It's do you want to be responsible for the consequences? Do you want to go to prison for robbing a bank? Do you want to be shot for doing what they say?
Yeah.
If you choose to follow the law, if you choose to do what this gunman says, you're doing so by your own freedom.
Well,
That there is the point.
I'd like to take a second to welcome Lord Pepe to the live stream here.
Oh,
Cheers.
hello.
Hello,
Hey,
Mr. Lord Pepe.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I wasn't really sure what you were discussing, so
we're reading right now Hobbes' Leviathan, chapter 21, going through each section. We went through your video already. It was very well done. The study was interesting. But we had a bit of a complaint about the demographics, or how it was read as representation. It's how did you phrase it, Brendan?
Oh shit! I'll be back.
Okay, essentially, Pepe, when you're discussing the races, you say that it's mostly white, and you say that it's an overrepresentation. And I disagree, because I don't think that we can be overrepresentative of ourselves, because everyone who is here by choice.
Oh, I obviously just meant that in at least America or the United Kingdom, there are probably more people that identified as liberalist than the general population. That's the only thing that it means.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So I'm so
It
used
just
to listening to power politics. I always assume that overrepresentation implies that you want to change. I'm so.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, but I think it's nevertheless important to look at like different demographics. I mean, there might be like different ways that are effective in reaching each demographic.
Well, I just got to say, I really enjoyed the video. It was nice complaints. There's a link underneath the stream. Anyone wants to check it out. And thank you for that. If you want to join us, we're going to start reading the next section. And
okay, I'm just going to find it.
I'm just going to read it out loud here. So, unless you need it in...
what's it? Chapter 22?
Chapter 21.
Chapter 21. There's a PDF in the description of the video.
All right, Brandon, what's this next section called?
Okay, section 4, which goes from liberty and necessity are consistent down to which only is properly called liberty, is liberty and necessity consistent.
All right, I got it here. Liberty and necessity are consistent, as in the water that hath not only liberty, but a necessity of descending by the channel. So likewise in the actions which men voluntarily do, which, because they proceed their will, proceed from liberty, and yet because every act of man's will and every desire and inclination proceeds from some cause, and that from another cause, in a continual chain, whose first link is in the hand of God, the first of all causes, proceed from necessity. So that to him that could see the connection of these causes, the necessity of all men's voluntary actions would appear manifest, and therefore God that seeth and disposeth all things, seeth also that the liberty of man in doing what he will is accompanied with the necessity of doing that which God will, and no more, nor less. For though men may do many things which God does not command, nor is therefore author of them, yet they can have no passion or appetite to anything, of which appetite God's will is not the cause, and did not his will assure the necessity of man's will, and consequently of all that on man's will depends, the liberty of men would be a contradiction and impediment to the omnipotence and liberty of God, and this shall suffice as to the matter in hand of that natural liberty, which only is properly called liberty.
Okay, that's it, yeah. So essentially it seems to be saying liberty and our desires and our will is all a consequence of God. That's essentially what this section seems to be saying.
Well, natural rights. We're
obviously I could be missing something. Yeah.
And if you consider God,
there does.
If you consider
so, yeah,
God,
what was you saying, sir?
If you consider God like a big bearded white guy in the sky throwing thunderbolts, that's really not nuanced. If you consider God like the laws of nature, things you don't understand just yet, or things that are beyond your reach, then yeah, I can see the argument for natural rights in that sense.
Yeah, there does seem to be some, like, at first glance, there may be some. There may seem to be some inconsistency with the idea of necessity coming from the idea of cause and effect, the idea that God was the first cause, and therefore through each cause and each effect, we're going to lead to the causes and consequences of man itself. That may seem to be an entirely deterministic way of seeing it, but ultimately, where Hobbes talks about the idea of the voluntary actions of man, I would say that Hobbes is of the school of thought that essentially says that man is free, but rather it's simply because we are essentially the spawn of God that we have the liberty to do what we wish, even though it may, as it says, go against what God even desires.
Well, that kind of fits with the whole tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil, in the Old Testament. Like the serpent gave them the information of what is good and what is evil, and now humans, according to the story in abstraction, now humans have the ability to choose, and which raises another good question: is someone actually a morally good person if they cannot choose evil? I mean, when you think about it.
Well, I'd say to be good requires the option to even choose evil in the first place. It's like where the with the story of the forbidden fruit, it only tells you what is good and what evil is, but you can always still choose to do otherwise.
Lord Pepe, you have any thoughts?
No, I was looking at the wrong chapter. I found it now, but this text is a little difficult for me. So
okay, yeah, it's some of it is
just stay quiet like I'm doing.
No,
the thing is, I understand it. I can't. I must be a low IQ beta because I completely understand what they're saying, but I find it difficult to articulate my thoughts on it. If that makes sense.
It does take some digestion. It kind of does.
I struggle with the confidence that I can explain it better than it's already been explained.
Yeah, Hobbes does a pretty good job, really.
I don't want to philosophize on the philosophy of it, if you know what I mean.
No, I've got a degree, so I'm allowed to do this.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. You're the high IQ philosophy alpha.
I am. I'm the Chad.
You're the Chad.
Yeah, my whole thing is assuring the rhetoric can be used for the working class, because I always say that if the working class doesn't adopt a movement, it doesn't go anywhere. So
yeah, that's a good point.
So
well, you have your working class right here, so
yeah, same here.
Actually, it's quite interesting how like the voting patterns of the working class have actually shifted rather drastically, both in regards to the Brexit election and the last U.S. presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually in Brit. I was reading Chatham House essay on the they call working class voters in Britain in the statistical studies, they call us C2s, and they were saying that the C2s have been responsible for every single major democratic decision, every single swing for like since the adoption of democracy. And it's only been in the last 30 years where the working class or the C2 voters have been particularly dismissive of politics. That we've had stagnant political systems. Yeah. So like Brexit was the first time where the raging fucking working class opened their eyes and went, "Ah, time to leave the union." We had major drastic change.
Yeah. Well, the same thing with the USA is the Democrats were for some time the party of the working class, coal workers back in the 1910s, 1920s. But the thing is, once socialism and socialist ideology invades a political ideology, it's less about uplifting the working class and more about hating and envying the rich. You can see that with Corbyn. We were talking earlier about his brilliant.
Yeah, but then you look at his voter base. He says, you know, he wants to take money away and all that, but his the majority of his voter base are middle and upper class people. The C2s are the reason that Labour aren't getting into power, because the C2s, the working class, are not voting for them.
Well, it's obvious that they hold the working class in disdain. It is.
Yeah, because we won't vote for them.
Actually, it was quite funny. I read some piece a while back that was like the average Corbyn voter is Welsh and vegetarian and depressed.
Sounds about right.
It's so obvious that little Marxist bastards.
Jesus.
They don't want to work as it is. Like, there's so many of them that are unemployed. What study was it that said, what, 90% north of people who subscribe to communist ideals don't work? Like, they just don't work. They're not in education. They just live in their parents' basement. Like,
Well, that's it, because the communists are always going, well, look, we're going to give you lots of free stuff, so you can carry on being a lazy down and out.
Yeah, I don't think they realise though that they're going to be put onto farms and they're going to be put into jobs and they're going to have to work. Otherwise, they get
Yeah,
the bullet.
exactly.
They don't realise it.
well, no. If you ever watched Yuri Bezmenov, if you search him on YouTube, I'll put a link up to it because it's really interesting. And he talks about Soviet measures for taking over a country. And
Oh, I've seen this. Yeah,
yeah,
I've seen
he's
this.
talking about how it's these people upholding these social justice values that are going to be squashed like cockroaches, he puts it. Like, once they see that their glorious utopia isn't what they think it is, they'll be the first to be taken out because they're going to be complaining first. And,
Oh yeah, because they
Yeah, this isn't what we wanted. Okay, bang, bullets to the back of the head.
all right,
Yeah, see,
go ahead. Sorry.
I would say if you look at the history of the United Socialist Soviet Republics, the Soviet Union, you'll see that very quickly there are general strikes and uprisings just after the revolution, and they are just put down with force. It's like the workers, all that stuff, it just went straight out the window. The general strike was put down just by bringing workers into factories at gunpoint.
Yeah. I mean, it's you gotta crack a few eggs, but you'll never see an omelet. That's for sure.
A whole lot of
well,
eggs.
as far as I'm aware, that was one of the reasons for the Holodomor. Essentially, supposedly it was essentially to just weaken Ukrainian peoples to stop an uprising.
I always thought,
At least
wasn't there
that's what I've read.
wasn't it contested whether it was a purposeful starvation or it was just bad policy?
It is contested, but it's rumored, so to say. So I'm not
'Cause
going to say
even-
definitely was, but
Well,
Even the Chinese during the Chinese famine, during the Great Leap Forward, because
God.
obviously they tried communist style of farming and it wasn't working, and then
Lysenkoism.
they had a few villages that would like do farming privately that worked, and initially they kept putting these down. They kept shooting the farmers and that, and then eventually they went, well, it's working, shall we just go with it? And they went with it, and the famine ended.
Well,
Yeah,
it's almost as if capitalism is the best system. It's strange.
Yeah.
That's a Deng Xiaoping policy. It was,
the Lysenkoism, right?
No, no, Deng Xiaoping.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the theory of Lysenkoism.
Yeah, I know what you're referring to, but they practiced that as well, but earlier. He's the liberalist. What's your name again? Sorry. Okay,
Bill.
Bill was referencing like how actually Chinese farmers were like secretly capitalist because they had like collective farms, but then they sort of spread the arable land amongst themselves to actually make it work in secret.
Well, that's really interesting. As far as the Holodomor goes, I'm gonna ignore the contesting of history by communists because they obviously have an agenda to,
Yeah.
like.
Well, either way you look at it, it's still the communists' fault. Whether it was a failure of policy or whether it was purposeful famine, whether it was a warlike famine. Either way, it shows a failure of communism. I say personally, I haven't seen concrete evidence to sway me on either side. So I just put it down to, well, they failed, regardless of what they've done, or regardless of intent.
Right.
Okay, there is one thing here that if you want to cast light on how terrible communism is, just talk to the Eastern Europeans. Actually, since I mentioned it, I know he's a bit of a controversial YouTuber.
It is I, we from Romania.
But actually, his videos on like how Eastern Europe used to be are actually, in my opinion, his most interesting videos. And
oh no, I love all of his videos.
Well,
Yeah,
I
like
have
that.
actually-
yeah, I do too. But I realize that he's a bit of a controversial figure, perhaps.
Well, I have actually family members who were from Yugoslavia on my wife's side, where after World War II, Tito's anti-fascist council came in, the paramilitary arm basically of the Communist Party. They came in and took people's private property and put them under the management of the pig herders. My wife's grandfather is still alive, and he's writing a book on this. He's been writing it for about 40 years, and he had to escape Yugoslavia when his aunt and uncle were put into labor camps, and people started starving when they took family farms away. And it's amazing the inverted pyramid of competency that occurs when they say, well, the only reason your family is successful is because you're stealing from people, so therefore we're going to take your farm and give it to the poorest, and everything's going to be great. Well, it turned out a lot of people starved because of that. Like, it's amazing, and I honestly should consider getting my wife's grandfather on a stream, because he's a very interesting guy. He went from Yugoslavia, escaped there when he was 12 with his family, came to America until he was 18, was an indentured servant, escaped that, broke his contract, went to a factory, met his wife, my wife's grandmother, and had a family, and rose up in the ranks, and now he owns like 3 homes, and he's a very proud capitalist guy and old school.
Product of the great American dream, eh?
Yeah, I mean, this guy is pure American dream with very broken English, but it's just he has some of the best stories about his walking all the way from Yugoslavia to I forgot which neutral country it is, but they got there and got out. But yeah.
Well, this actually, since you mentioned it, a lot of Icelanders actually live in America, and Canada as well. A lot of them emigrated during the 19th century when we were one of the poorest nations in Europe. We're one of the richest now, but there's like half of all Icelanders are actually in America.
Jesus.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
Yeah, but you realize we were like the poorest nation, and then there were volcanic eruptions that killed like all the livestock, and they were like, oh, want to starve or move to America?
That's a tough choice. Now, starve or move to California, that would be a very tough choice for me.
No, it's an easy choice.
I'm hoping Corbyn gets in, because if he gets in, then I'm not starving. I'm moving to America.
All right, you want to move on, Brendan, on this Leviathan here?
Oh yeah, section 5. Artificial bonds or covenants, but as men.
All right. But as men, for the attaining of peace and conservation of themselves, thereby have made an artificial man, which we call a commonwealth. So also have they made artificial chains, called civil laws, which they themselves, by mutual covenants, have fastened at one end of the lips of that man or assembly to whom they have given the sovereign power, and at the other end to their own ears. These bonds, in their own nature but weak, may nevertheless be made to hold by the danger, though not by the difficulty of breaking them.
Okay, that's it. Okay, so essentially this is just the idea of the Leviathan. It's the joining together of man freely in order to protect themselves. Because it's earlier on in the book, it's like page 81. No, it's not page 81. It's earlier in the book when Thomas Hobbes talks about the state of nature. State of nature, as everyone knows, the state of nature is nasty, brutish, and short. It is ultimately a state of violence. So the only way to protect yourself from this violence is by coming together. So it's essentially just the free joining of man and man to form the sovereign.
Okay, if I remember correctly, he's advocating for like the absolute rule of kings or something.
Yes, he sees it's like a different part of the book. But I'll quickly talk about the actor and author. Every individual is an author of their own will, so that they are the ones who choose what they think and what they do. An actor is a representative of your authorship. So, for instance, in a democracy, we are all authors, but then we choose an actor through voting to act as the representative of what we author. The difference here comes since it's an absolute monarchy essentially. The sovereign not only is an actor of what you author, they then become the author, because everything that you would want, they do. So everything they do is essentially what you would want. So if they end up murdering somebody, ultimately it's what you want.
Okay.
It's not the best system, but Hobbes seems to like it. So I guess that's what we'll start with.
I will grant
It's an awful
it.
system.
It's awful, but it's better than state of nature.
Yes, it ultimately is. Like I think it was Mill who says essentially, the thing about the state is it's the king of the vultures. It stops all the other vultures picking on you, but occasionally it's gonna fuck you up. That's
Actually, how I
yes, sir?
remembered Hobbes was like, in short, like, oh, the Civil War was so terrible, we got to have an absolute king. Goodbye.
Oh yeah, that's it. It was straight after a war. So yeah,
So you'd say he's
it was
more
a
of
justification for monarchy.
you'd say he was more of a victim of the times, in a sense.
I'd say he was a victim of the times, and I'm happy for it because it's a very good book. And while some of it is, I disagree with entirely. For instance, the part on fear and liberty being consistent, I think is one of the most important things that has ever been written. It's just superb.
This guy was a smart.
But you
cookie.
find that with a lot of philosophy. Most of philosophy is absolute shit, but occasionally there's one sentence you're like, fucking yes. That is it. This whole book has been worth it.
But will you ever find a job?
No,
We went there.
It's okay though because I'm writing a book. There we go.
There we go.
I'm going to read
fund-
your entire book just for that one sentence.
We told you no more talking about your book until it's published, man.
I have the liberty to do so.
That you do. That you
Not if
do.
I put a gun to the back of your head. You have the liberty to tell me
I'll
to
do
fuck
it.
off.
I'll do it anyway. I still have the freedom.
All right, let's go to.
I must admit though, we touched on the point of monarchy. Obviously he's a product. Hobbes is a product of his time, but I
Yeah.
believe that monarchy is actually, and I even believe that a constitutional monarchy is detrimental to freedom. And I say that as someone who is a quasi-monarchist because I like the crown, the British crown. I like it for the cultural connotations, but in terms of political freedoms, I believe that they're actually an obstruction, especially because we can't codify and put on paper a constitution with the crown in place.
Yeah, it's also quite hard to hold a monarchy to account since you didn't vote them in.
Well,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
Oh, you have.
That's one of
But
the
no, I
problems.
think
They
Hobbes,
become.
Hobbes was dealing with the best system he had, really.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So-
I don't know much about Hobbes, I must admit. When did he write this?
He was an old fucker. This I'm pretty sure is 16th century. He was actually like the tutor to royalty as well.
Yeah. So it wasn't like when republics were the rule. Obviously not. Not in the 16th century, no.
No, so it was 17th century apparently.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm sure
Yeah,
I'm
so it's-
reading the very beginning of the book. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really just it's an extension of thought from the time of Socrates and such.
Yeah, I don't think he's along the lines of Plato's Republic because he doesn't want a philosopher king. He just wants a sovereign, if that makes sense. So someone who will not be refuted, who will do what is best for the people. Ultimately,
But what
that
about
leads
when they
to
don't?
It kind of
no. That's it though. Hobbes says it's impossible for it to not be so, because in making the Leviathan the actor and thereby the author, nothing they do seems to go. I could be misremembering, and if I am, someone can correct me. But essentially, apart from like if they start just slaughtering the entire population, like most things they do are going to be essentially what you author in making them your actor.
Okay.
It's too meta for me.
Okay, so he is perhaps like the Leviathan or the king is justified in doing a lot of things, including ones that violate our
Yes.
liberties. But
Yeah.
as long as he's like better than state of nature, because at least that is an improvement.
Oh yes, that is it. So essentially, the Leviathan is essentially the way to escape the state of nature.
Um, okay, so okay,
Yeah, and yeah.
this theory, at least Thomas Hobbes has an immense what you call it. He gave rise to like the social contract theory. That's his legacy probably today.
I don't, I don't think I'd say he would use the word covenant because that's the word he uses a lot. I wouldn't really call it a
Sort of, it's the
contract.
same thing, though, isn't
It's
it?
the same thing. Come on now.
Yeah, it's
Like if
there's
you
a bit of a difference though.
if you had to tie back the theory of social contract, I mean, you would go back to Rousseau as he wrote the book, but Rousseau was working off of Hobbes' work
Mm.
in a lot
No,
of
so I'm
ways.
just trying to think of the words I want to use here. Essentially,
Oh, maybe
it seems to.
I worded it too strongly. I more like gave rise to it instead of like.
Oh, instead of being responsible for it, he gave rise to the thought process that became the social contract. So much so.
Yeah, something more like that.
He was the spark that lit the fire.
That's very.
Yeah, essentially that's how I would put it. Because oh, yeah, okay, covenant and contract, but both work. It's essentially just the free joining of people
kind of
into one unit.
Honestly, the whole Leviathan thing he's talking about here reminds me of Donald Trump in a way, in a conversation I had with someone trying to say that Donald Trump's an oligarch, which an oligarch works towards very few people within an inner circle to enrich them. I argue that Donald Trump is an imperialist. We return back to American imperialism, which an imperialist government is it extends a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force, and I feel like that's what Trump's now in the business world. Donald Trump is very much an oligarch. He wants what's best for him and his shareholders. But as far as he's acting, and I'm talking as someone who's read over 60 of his executive actions, and I've read at least 6 of the giant bills: the American Health Care Act, the net neutrality rollback, and the tax bill. I read all of them because I don't sleep anyway.
Jesus.
In the tax one, I had to read 3 different versions because they kept changing it. But that's why I argue that Trump is an imperialist, which is far more preferable than the Clinton, Obama, Bush kind of oligarchs that they were. And I feel like now, while a majority of America may not have voted for Trump into office, a majority of the states did. And
Yeah.
and I don't think Thomas Hobbes ever thought about the Electoral College because it didn't exist back then. But
No, I don't even think he. I don't. As far as I remember, he didn't really see it as democratic either. It was essentially just unanimous. But by the time if you're born into it, that's it essentially. The actions of your parents, or their parents, and so on, bring you into the state. And as far as I'm aware, he's concerned, being born into the Leviathan is infinitely preferable to being born into the state of nature.
right.
And no sane person would choose to go back.
I would,
I think the power of.
but I'm not saying.
See, I wouldn't choose to go back because it would require that everyone goes back with me in a sense. That's why I think anarchy is a different kind of tyranny.
Yeah.
The thing is, I would rather live in a state of nature than under a state of authority. As insane as that sounds, because I believe that from my own will, I can create a better future for myself than those who are dictating what they believe is a better future for me.
Yeah, but
If
do
it
you
was
have-
if it was
I
genuine
agree.
oppression, I mean,
Between
if all my
this or a
families,
state of nature.
if they're, if I'm living in a state where because I'm a white man, I'm only allowed to earn 10p a day and I'm only allowed to have a half an apple for dinner,
Or you're talking
then
about,
I would.
You're talking about living under an authoritarian state, not just
Yeah, I would
authoritarian.
rather live in a state of nature than under an authoritarian state.
That's
Okay,
why, that's why violence is acceptable against the state once it
Yeah,
becomes
that's
authoritarian.
why revolutions is an acceptable form of.
Yeah, that's the only time violence against the state is acceptable, is when it's against an authoritarian state. Now, I wouldn't want to live in a state of nature because I know there's people that wouldn't be able to make it that I care about. Like, not to say that they're weaker, or not to say even that I would make it, but I know for a fact that, like, my 4-year-old nephew is not going to make it if it's Mad Max out there, you know?
Yeah, but it would be your duty to make it, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, I guess so. It would also be my duty as a family, but I'm not that big of a person as it is, and I know that Kevin Spacey would come around collecting the children, so I got to be careful.
Okay,
I'm not big either, but I know how to make shanks.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why you should always collect bottle caps in case we return to a state of nature.
I've watched enough zombie apocalypse films to know what to do in the state of nature.
I run with the assumption that I'd be among the first to die because I'm very much a risk taker. I like taking risks, and I know I'm just not cut out for it.
Through sheer will alone, I will survive through.
For the last year, I've been taking survivalist classes with former Army sergeants, just for urban and outdoor stuff. It's basically Boy Scouts for the apocalypse. It's not because I think anything's going to happen. It's because I read a Dan Rather book about I think it's Dan Rather, about the electrical grid in America and how sensitive it is, and if it goes out, it's out for a long time. And it made me think. I turned to my wife and I'm like, if this happens, what the hell skills do I have? Like, none. So, I mean, I think honestly everyone should maybe take a look at it and see if that's.
I think you'd be surprised. I mean, obviously I don't know what your upbringing's like, but my upbringing was probably as close to a state of nature as you can get within a liberal democracy. So I've learned how to survive that way. So I'm ready for the nuclear apocalypse. Bring it on. But I'm just saying, you would be surprised. I mean, I personally do think that everyone should be prepared for any eventuality. But I think even a lot of people, a lot of men especially, would fare better than they thought in a.
Here's a question that I think is really good. Where do you draw the line on when a state is authoritarian? From Charlie Townsend. I would say the line for myself, the line is drawn as when you have no intervention possible through the system itself. Like if, let's say, they got rid of the American Constitution, got rid of elections, that to me would be the line. Like, you took away our chance to make change peaceably. It's that old JFK quote: those that make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. What do you guys think?
No, that seems
I like your analogy.
Ultimately, I'd say we do live in a somewhat authoritarian state simply because we are punished for utilizing some rights, such as the right to defend yourself. In the UK, if you defend yourself, well, hope you like prison.
That's arguable. That's arguable.
Limited free speech. I'd say that we have a right to these things, and I'm working on.
I mean, it's arguable that you don't have a right to defend yourself in Britain. If someone
actually attacks me and I subdue them, chances are I'm going to end up in a bit of trouble.
I don't know. I'll do your research on that one. It would seem to me, because I have looked into this sort of thing, and it would seem it's the people going to prison for say a burglar breaking into their house and then they've killed said burglar.
Oh, it's all about reasonable force.
People going to prison for that is the exception, not the rule. In fact, from the one that I did read, the only one that I could really dig out where it was quite clear that the guy deserved to go to prison was someone had broke into his house. He chased the guy out of the house, chased him down the pavement about 150 yards and beat him to death with a baseball bat. But this geezer was already on legs. Yeah, exactly.
It always comes down to reasonable force, and I don't want someone else deciding what my reasonable force is.
I'm just saying, in actual,
that's my contention. Yeah.
In actual terms, though, in actual real world terms, if you look into it, it's the exception, not the rule, that someone goes to prison for defending themselves.
Yeah, but I don't like the idea of anyone going to prison for defending themselves, really. Unless someone slaps them and they just shoot them or something. I'm okay with that. All right.
That's not defending.
Well, that's not reasonable.
When you look at the reasons people have gone to prison for, air quotes, defending themselves, it's like this geezer chased the bloke down a pavement and beat him to death with a baseball bat, even though he was already running away. Yeah, and there's been instances where people have broken into houses and the person so-called defending themselves has tied them to a chair and fucking stuck electric nipple clamps on them for 2 hours until they died.
In which case, I don't see how anyone could ever define that as defence, though. That's the problem.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. When you hear of people going to prison for defending themselves, I have yet to find an example where the person has reasonably defended themselves.
Actually, there is a problem of perception here. A lot of
Yeah.
defendants claim self-defense a lot. It's quite common, but usually when it's very clear that self-defense is actually justified, in that cases the prosecution doesn't press charges. So we
Yeah,
usually
exactly.
have like rather lame appeals to self-defense that are usually rejected, at least in my court system, and it's rather strict, as in the United Kingdom.
All I was getting at is I think the notion that you don't have the right to defend yourself in Britain is not a truthful one. I think it's actually, and I'm not placing a judgment on yourself. But
I will have to look. No, I will have to look into
I
that.
think
But as
it's
far as I'm
reasonable.
aware, we do have limitations on what.
Well, yeah, that limitation
essentially
is you can't
would
beat to
classify
death someone with a baseball bat after running 100 yards away from them.
No, I didn't mean like that. Essentially, oh no, it's to say it's like I don't like the idea of other people having like defining things for me. So essentially, like I say it's the same thing with essentially freedom of speech. The idea of someone else being the arbiter of what is acceptable.
But we need that.
But
We're not anarchists.
I don't know. No, I didn't mean like that. I just mean
You're talking about someone making the victim making the supposed victim making the claim that they're.
Yes, that's what I meant. The idea of the victim being the arbiter.
Yeah.
Because if you're a victim, if you're the victim, then always, if you're going to be the arbiter as well, then you're going to push for yourself.
That's why we have blind justice, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the point, though. If someone punches you and then you punch them back, then if they are the arbiter, since they could see themselves as the victim of your self-defense, then they could say it was unjustified or it was unreasonable force.
Yeah, but then that's why you have that's why you have a system of courts and policing that will decide whether the victim is actually a victim or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you need a third party that's objective.
Exactly.
That's what a judge is for. You know?
I would keep in mind that some forms of self-defense are really unreasonable. You can like defend your property, for example, but are you gonna shoot shoplifters with shotguns?
No, I mean, it doesn't fit the.
No,
like,
you're literally
happens in America.
Well, no,
you're literally defending your property, so it's self-defense.
In America,
but
it falls
just
under
unreasonable force.
Yeah, in America, it falls under cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah, I think I read a not to get on at the American police, but I read a story about an American police officer shooting to death a homeless man for stealing, like I guess we call it a Mars bar. I don't know what you call it, but yeah, like for stealing a 60p chocolate bar. He was shot to death.
He pulled it out of his pocket. You don't do that. Like
True.
You don't.
Oh no! I tell you what it was. It was toothpaste. Yeah, I remember now.
It's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, so many people can acquire guns that the police have to function as if everyone has a gun.
Yeah, it's certainly it is difficult.
But the training does need to change a lot. That's a totally.
It was
That's totally different.
that video that made the rounds, like Joe Rogan shared it, and that of the geezer in the hallway.
The guy in the hallway, yeah.
Yeah, and I watched it, and straight off the bat, I was like, well, for a start, the copper, the policeman is too antagonistic.
Yes.
But having said that, the geezer did reach for his waist, and I'm sitting there and I'm trying to put myself in the position of the copper and thinking, well, would I take the risk of being shot? It's hard to place a judgment on it, isn't it?
Well,
hard
also,
to place a judgment.
Go ahead.
I agree with his sentiment that it's different in America because gun ownership is so very common there. Like here, only one person has been shot by the police, and he was actually shooting at the police with a shotgun. But so it's like undisputed, really. Yeah. But
yeah,
it's more. I can see how it's more difficult in America.
Well, the problem I'm having is in my city where I live right now, a 15-year-old kid. This just happened the other day. The trial. A 15-year-old kid stole a car, and he attempted to ram the police by backing up into them. The cop, a friend of mine actually, the police officer, was pinned between the offender's car and a parked car, and he unholstered his weapon and shot the driver. He was pinned in there. So in self-defense, he shot the driver, and they tried to put him up for trial, and a jury of his peers determined that it wasn't fit to go to trial. So we have the intersectional left come out and claim that they're protesting police brutality, but what if they were...
They're gaining political points.
Yeah, if they were really concerned about police brutality, they wouldn't hold up these counterproductive examples of criminals who clearly, I wouldn't say got what coming to them, but endangered their own lives in a way as to make these shootings occur. Like, that guy in the hallway, for instance, is a better example of bad police training. This kid who stole a car and tried to ram a cop is a horrible example to hold up if you actually want to change police brutality. But I don't think they actually want to change police brutality. I think what they want to do is keep the problem going to maintain their relevance.
Well, that's it. Yeah, they're protesting for political points.
Yeah,
not for objective fact of the situation at hand.
I actually covered this in a video I made about fake hate crimes, because it's really hard to find the hate crime. I mean, you have to be at the right place at the right time, and so it's they use it as for to score political points. And if you're an activist, you really need an enemy. So there's a great deal of incentive to fake this sort of stuff and to ignore facts like if the police shooting cases are not all created equal, like the guy in the armor said. Some are more justified, others are difficult to justify, but they'll portray everything as impossible to justify just because it suits their narrative, and it makes their work seem more important, so their organizations get more money and they can get on the media more and be more influential. And
yeah.
So I have absolutely zero faith that even these activists are acting in good faith.
No, it's this is what Anton LaVey says in the Satanic Bible. You know, the church owes the devil so much because without the devil, they wouldn't be in business. Ideologies need an enemy. If you're not an active organization, then surely you must be reactive. If you're reactive, then you must always have something to react to.
Mm-hmm.
Which in this case is the police brutality.
There's one point that actually Killdeer brought up once, that is the symbiotic relationship between the social justice warriors on YouTube and the quote-unquote skeptic community.
Well, yeah, it was. Yeah, they were propping up each other's
views.
I mean, you look at when I first started getting into the skeptic community, it was purely because I'd seen some fucking stupid SJW things on TV, and I thought, I'll have to watch that again on YouTube. This was years ago, and then I found loads of compilation videos, and I found loads of feminists getting wrecked, and then I've come across Sargon, and then I come across this. So had it not been for the SJW existence, I would not be talking to you guys right now, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Thank you, SJWers.
Gents, I do apologise, but I must leave.
All right, I think we're.
Oh, yeah, it's half. Yeah, we can continue next time with Hobbs because we only went through 5 sections.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot more than I thought it would be, but I would love to have a stream with you, Lord Pepe, about any topic. You seem extremely intelligent. I love your channel. There's a link to it underneath in the description if anyone wants to take a look at Lord Pepe's work. If you can cross-endorse us, I would really appreciate that. And I hope.
Oh, certainly. I'll spread the word. And thank you. It's overly kind. I'm sort of embarrassed.
Cheers, guys. I gotta go. Cheers. Bye bye.
Cheers. Have a good one, guys.
Everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank
Bye.
you.